excited about our panel that we have who will be joining us. Tom Vander Ark is the author and now the CEO of Getting Smart. We have Ms. Kelly Wells, who is the Director of U.S. Education for the GE Foundation. And we have Dr. TAMI, who is the Executive Director of the Utah STEM Action Center. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
I am completely giddy about following Alex and Pedro because I am super excited about the premise that both of them introduced us to this morning. One, that we have to engage every single student. And what I'm really excited about is the fact that we're living through a revolution in learning, in how human beings learn. There has never been a better time to learn. The tool set and the strategies improve every single month. And that, not only, as Alex said, makes it easier to start a business, to become an entrepreneur, it also makes it easier to engage young people in and out of school. So it's becoming easier to engage kids in super exciting work, particularly in STEM. So this is a perfect follow-up to the last two presentations. Pedro talked about the need to depoliticize education. Pedro, I've been working in El Paso, Texas. It was the worst example of test prep in the United States. It led to cheating and then embezzlement. The whole former management team is in jail, and the superintendent there is leading an effort he calls active learning to engage kids in critical thinking and to producing real high quality work product. It's interesting that you talked about instead of disciplining kids, engaging kids and using character development as a discipline strategy. That's what they're doing in El Paso to dramatically reduce the number of suspensions. So we're seeing communities put in practice what you were talking about. I want to start with an exercise that we've been using in El Paso, and we've been engaging the community in a conversation starting with this question: how has the world changed? So at your table, in 90 seconds, I want you to make a list of 1 or 2 word phrases about how the world has changed since you were in school. You get extra credit for trends that start with the letter C. Go. How has the world changed? Say hi. Hey, that was awesome. That's my first one.
I think it's on already. Is it already on? Yeah, just lift it up just a little and I'll tell you if I see that. Yeah, it's on. Okay, so we didn't have to do anything.
So they can't hear us yet.
No,
okay.
No, because they'll activate, yeah.
Shows you what I know about the T and STEM.
Yeah.
Right. It's always a scientist.
This is great, a great turnout.
For the last day, I'm impressed.
That's what I thought too.
I was,
right?
you know, when I got the call and they asked if I could make a quick trip out and do this, I was like, oh, great, the last presentation.
Yeah, right, right.
Like, but I'm impressed. And Pedro was fantastic. I'm both on the lookout for keynotes. So he's on my hit list now.
Oh, how funny. Oh, that's great. Yeah, yes.
So you're with GE then?
I am. I'm with the foundation.
Okay.
And I run our education and skills portfolio globally.
Okay.
And so we did a lot on the K-12 system, but what we have found is that bridge. And so because we are struggling to hire.
All right, maybe my runners can help me grab a couple tables. Let's do super quick lightning report out. Pick a table. Right. You can start here. Our lead table has a good list too. Go.
The speed of research and the availability of the access to it.
Access to what?
Research.
Okay. Grab another table, quick.
We've got a few C's.
Go.
Lack of compromise and collaboration in Congress. Classroom size is smaller. Cell phones, computers, and communication, as well as cars.
You get a lot of C's in there. That's good.
So
Thank you. How about Tony, your table? Over here with Tony. Tony Smith. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, here.
Go.
Computers, cell phones, messaging, cable, internet, immediate gratification, space exploration, communication, careers, satellite, health advancement, and research.
Awesome. Bonus. Yeah. Yes, go.
Okay, we don't have a lot of C's, but technology, healthcare, the speed of just everything, transportation and mobility, consumerism, interconnectivity, interdependence globally, demographics, availability of information, and the speed at which it's available.
That's the gifted and talented table. That was awesome. All right, one more. Cuba. Thank you. I guess we have an embassy there now, right? I heard that this morning. Well, one more? Do you guys want to add to the list?
It's all pretty much said. They're doing.
That's a good list.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a good list, and you guys did that lightning fast. Here's my version. I'll go through it really quick. Connected, a lot of you talked about this. We now have maybe 2 billion of the 7 billion people on the planet are connected to the internet. Maybe 5 billion things, 8 billion devices now connected to the internet. It's really extraordinary what's happened just in the last 5 years. I called it contested. I think we're more contested. The world's always been a contested place, but what has changed is that we're contested and now in channels. We each have these self-reinforcing channels where we hear news tailored to our own point of view, and I think that's reinforcing the political gridlock that Pedro and some of you talked about. The world's getting a lot more complex. We've built human systems that are now prone to black swan events, things that nobody predicted. I listed just Fukushima, the flash crash of 2010, gas prices and global warming. But the systems that we've created are extraordinarily complex, and they're intersecting in ways that none of us can really predict. The world's becoming hyper-competitive. When you start a startup, the good news, as Alex said, is you can do it very inexpensively, and you can have a global app in 2 weeks. But there's also a lot of people in China and India that are trying to do exactly the same thing that you are, and so you are competing on a global basis. I think the world values contribution now more than ever, but it's different. When I grew up, it was working hard. That was the most important thing. If you worked hard, you got a decent education in America, you'd be successful. That's not good enough anymore. First of all, I think the world requires sort of non-conformity, people that think differently. Peter Thiel talked about that on a great podcast with Tyler Cowen a week ago. That's a terrific listen if you're interested. As Ken Robinson often talks about, creativity is more important than ever. And I think design thinking, being able to think about the system of things, is now rewarded more than ever. So those are some of the new demands that exist. Now, if we were doing a community meeting, I would shift and say, at your tables, let's talk about what do kids need to know and be able to do. Given the way that the world has changed, what are the new skills that kids need? I'll give you my 2-minute version, but I think the fact that we're connected means that kids more than ever need really good communication skills. As Pedro said, they need to read more than ever, and I believe they need to write more than ever. Most American kids need to write 3 or 4 times more than they're writing, and like they do in Esther Wojcicki's class at Palo Alto High, they need to not only write by themselves, but they need to write in a team and produce world-class publications, things that they can be proud of. Hundreds of kids at Palo Alto High are involved in their journalism program, and they produce extraordinary work products, things they can put in their portfolio and be proud of. Alex had a great picture up there of producing collaboratively with another group. And that has changed my life. I write a blog every day, a white paper every month, and a book every year. And I do it with a team of about 15 people, and usually between 50 and 100 collaborators on each book project. And we do it all in Google Docs. And so I crowdsource writing with a big group of people, and it's an extraordinary, really new way to think together, to get smart fast. And I think our kids need opportunities to do that. Contested means I think kids need to learn to be collaborative, to work in small and large teams. This is 4.0 Schools in New Orleans. It's the best incubator of talent tools in schools in America. I love these stand-up meetings that they do. They're very quick staff meetings, and you can see they even beam in members of their staff who are in other cities, who come in on via a little robot. Critical thinking is now more important than ever. Alex and Pedro both talked about this. Here's the best example that I've seen in the United States in the last year. It's a Science Leadership Academy. You've probably been there, Pedro. It's a Philadelphia public school where I was yesterday. This school has a set of values about what they think high engagement learning looks like. They say inquiry, research, collaboration, presentation, reflection. The cool thing is, Pedro talked about good teaching being a team sport. When you visit every single classroom, you see evidence of those values in practice. Kids in the front of the room, you see a buzz of active learning happening in every space. So, as Alex said, double down on critical thinking. That is not going to happen in test prep. That is going to happen with intentional, challenging work. Creativity is super important. I love the little academies that are created at the Kettle Moraine Public School District in Milwaukee. They have 4 of these small academies that teacher leaders have started. They're student-centered, they're blended, they're competency-based. That's my picture of what next generation learning looks like. And you can see they've found a good use for their old textbooks. They use textbooks to build coffee tables and end tables. I was an enterprising parent. If you're wondering, that took a lot of glue and screws to pull off. Pedro talked about persistence, grit. I call it crank. We need kids that have work ethic to work hard. One way to do that is to let kids do what they're interested in. And that's when they do crank. And I saw that a couple weeks ago in Kansas City at the Center for Professional Studies. It's a career center that 6 big high schools share. I saw it at Metro ECS last month, the best STEM school in Ohio. It anchors the STEM network in Ohio. So that's my sense of the sort of new demands that our kids face and the new skills that they face. As Pedro said, that's a broader agenda than reading, writing, and math. We need to, as state leaders, as system leaders, embrace a broader set of aims for education, and we need to do everything that we can to engage kids in what I would call next generation learning. I want to take a couple of quick comments, both from our panelists and the audience, to describe what that next generation learning looks like. So maybe the runners can help me. Giselle and Tom are going to give us a quick summary. While you're coming up here, Kelly, what's a good example of what that next generation or high engagement STEM learning might look like?
Yeah, I would say the best model or example that I can really think about is some of the work that's actually happening across New York City. And it's not just in a particular school, you're seeing it system-wide where this change is happening. They're taking the standard career tech education concept there, those vocational type of programs, and leveraging where the classes are really using STEM integration with robotics. They're having it where it touches upon the healthcare industry and the issues there too. So it doesn't become just science being integrated there, it's the science, it's the math, it's the technology, the engineering, all truly coming together in an environment where these kids are not just on this path where they're saying, okay, I'm just learning this from a textbook anymore, but they're really now doing a very deep integration. And as I said, it's a system-wide push that the chancellor is really trying to drive.
That's great. Tammy, what in Utah?
Well, in Utah, it's interesting because you put up the Blue Valley CAPS program, and we shamelessly steal whatever looks like is working out there.
Yeah, it's a cool place.
We call it best practices, but it's really just stealing good ideas and trying to mold them to what we need in our state. But there's an interesting model that the National Science Foundation embraced several years back that's been replicated across the country that I think we're very proud to say we started in Utah, and it's really based upon a business model, a contract research model, right? And so, you know, many companies out there have these projects, and I want to back up and say this really is based upon industry engagement, which I think is really what the next generation learning model needs to be to be embracing, is getting our industry engaged more. And so this model is a contract research model. It was initiated with the life science industry, which was very strong and still is in the state of Utah. And it basically looked at companies and said, we have a value proposition, we want to align with yours. We can do something you can't, what is that? And it was across the board. We had, you know, Dugway Proving Ground that said, we have a biosim project we can't do here, could you do that? Well, biosim and boys, you couldn't believe the kids we had to turn away on a project that we contracted from Dugway for that. We had, you know, various life science companies that said we can't do cell culture. So we said, we've got a cell culture facility. Let's leverage our resource with your needs and get kids doing it. And so we had students that were doing projects in teams on contracted projects with companies, with our staff overseeing that. And it transformed how the companies looked at the value of the students. They looked at the value of the education system, our resources, and the students. It changed how they looked at the world and their involvement. And we saw high school students that took on a level of resourcefulness and independence and self-worth. And in fact, we had high school students that got frustrated with our college students that became involved in the project, saying that they just didn't get it. You know, just step aside and let us high school kids do this. So, I mean, it's been a wonderful model, and I know that the group out in Akron has modified it to use it for energy audit-based contract work. There was some work in California for the crime lab and some of the work that they needed to move on that they couldn't handle. So it's an interesting model. It's a little different than PC CAPS. So,
so it's engaging kids in real work and introducing them to real clients.
Absolutely.
New York City iSchool, nyciSchool.org is another terrific example of a school that does that. Giselle and I are really fond of Summit Public Schools, summitps.org, and think that's about the best example of next generation learning. Giselle, describe that.
Yeah, so basically, it's a marriage between what Pedro was describing as a school that really works and what the elements are that are necessary with what Alex was describing as the world as it is now. And what Summit does is combine those two things, bring the educational experience into the 21st century, and they have created a model which includes 4 elements as far as what the children do. The first one is the use of technology for content. So they learn, they gain the knowledge they need through the computer with all of the interventions that are built in and the assessments and they have the second element is they have an advisor that helps them develop a playlist for what they're going to do weekly, monthly, what they're aiming for, what their path is, and they constantly check back with the advisor to make sure that they're on the right path. Thirdly, they have an element of where they apply the knowledge that they're gaining on projects, where they have project-based learning in the classroom with their peers and they work together. And the fourth element is, and this is 6th grade through 12th grade, the fourth element is an internship. For 8 weeks out of the year, the kids leave the campus and are placed in real internships, even the 6th graders, which gives the teachers in the schools 8 weeks of professional development. And in that period of time, they refine the kinds of projects they're going to be offering the kids to do. They refine their pedagogy, and the results are amazing. But the most important part of this is that the children have the agency. They're in control of what they're doing with a heavy-duty, infusion of adults guiding them and facilitating what they need to do.
Thanks, great description. Pedro, the thing I like about Summit is that they combine personalized learning with embedded assessments and projects that include performance assessments, as you and Linda Darling-Hammond described so well. So it's the combination of the best of digital learning and project-based learning. Is Howard Stevenson here? I'd love to have him talk about what bills that he's supported in Utah. I'll do my own version of that after Tom. Maybe the most profound change that we're going through, Tom, is the shift from time, kids advancing in age cohorts when they get a year older, to advancing as they demonstrate mastery. Some of us call it competency-based learning, but you're an expert in that and you talk about it. Tell us about that shift.
So I think one of the biggest tragedies in education is this idea of Swiss cheese learning, where students go on and we pass them on from grade to grade based on, well, you got a C, you got a D, that's good enough to pass. Well, that means that they're missing 30, 40% of the content from that course, but we just keep moving them on. And then I think that's why we end up with students later on in middle school, high school. You have students that say, well, I'm just not good at math. I'm just not good at science. And it's not that they lack the capacity to understand those subjects, it's that those gaps in their understanding have built up from year to year because we have this system where students just move on based on, we move through a unit, we take a test, if you pass the test, you move to the next unit. And so the real exciting development in competency-based education that's getting tried in a number of places across the country is going to a model where you say, we'll let the length of time that it takes you to master a subject, master a unit of content, we'll let that time vary, but we'll hold the expectation of quality learning constant. And so students don't advance until they demonstrate mastery. Now that doesn't mean that we let some students just flounder behind and stay behind, grade after grade, year after year. In good competency-based systems, teachers are pushing students and making sure that they're making progress and advancing, and they're coaching students to troubleshoot, what are their learning difficulties and how do we get you over these mastery objectives that you need to accomplish. But it really helps to ensure that all students get a high-quality education because we make sure that all students are learning the content they need to learn to be successful in their later education and in their careers.
So it's Tom Arnett from the Christensen Institute. They and iNACOL both write on this frequently, testify on it frequently. I'll also add that all three organizations also believe in competency-based teacher development and preparation. We just published a paper, it's on gettingsmart.com, that describes how teacher and leader preparation should be competency-based. And we think if we engage teachers in a blended, personalized, competency-based pathway, that they're going to be much more likely to be able to create that for kids. Senator Stevenson, talk about some of your work to introduce smart, personalized technology to kids in Utah.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. We have been looking at trying to get more digital learning into our schools, and there's been a lot of talk about online, blended. Those words don't really indicate quality, because digital learning is a mile wide and an inch deep in a lot of areas, and it isn't impacting. In fact, one-to-one devices we find are actually reducing student performance because if they're not focused on the content, they become a distraction. So in Utah, we have been offering schools licenses to high-quality computer-assisted instructional software, and we only offer enough for 1/3 of the schools. And the magic there is that we've learned that educators will fight for a chance to distinguish their school, their faculty, their students. And when they hear of a scarce opportunity, saying only 1/3 of the schools in the state can qualify for these reading software in K-3, or ELL software for English language learners, or math software K-12, what we have found is that we now have 200,000 kids getting daily doses of personalized math instruction. Instead of going home and crying over their math homework, the teachers are implementing this math software in their regular instructional program, and kids are getting immediate feedback and feeling good about their success in math. You go into these classes, these labs where they're doing math, and they say, I never knew I would love math. So we call it the scarcity model, where we offer enough for a third, and the teaching teams get together and say, we want to qualify for this. We didn't know about it. We didn't know that it had an effect, but it must be good because we can qualify for it. And so they bring their plan for implementation and say, please let us implement this high quality software. And the scores are just really increasing.
Really good results.
Well, in some cases we get double and triple the growth of the classes without it. Our pre-K program in the home, they give the Bader and the Brigance to both the control group and to the students who are on the Upstart program. And these Upstart kids are doubling and tripling the growth of the students who are in the control group, who are getting regular pre-K or daycare or whatever is being provided.
Right.
It's
been exciting to watch.
Pardon me?
It's been exciting to watch.
It is, and the kindergarten teachers, when they evaluate the students who show up after having 1 year as a 4-year-old in the home, they say invariably, this student already knows everything I'm going to teach this year. So rather than having them bored while I'm teaching the other students, let's put them in the first grade reading group.
So a competency-based system like Tom described. Thank you, Senator. That's a great description there of personalized learning, blended learning, competency-based learning. These are all great pictures of next generation that's particularly applicable in STEM. I'm going to close just by summarizing in a minute the research that we have done over the last 3 years studying cities that seem to be making big advances in the sort of high engagement learning that Dr. Noguera talked about. So we called that next generation learning over there on the left. We think it starts with an innovation mindset that city and system leaders need to lead with the sort of mindset that we want to create. If we want kids to be entrepreneurial, as Alex told us, we need to lead in that sort of way. Second, sustained leadership is super important. Pedro talked about the need to depoliticize education. The most important way is to have stable and effective governance. Denver, DPS, is a great example of that. They've had a very good school board for a long time, and as a result, they've had 3 very, very good superintendents compared to other districts where you've seen the revolving door leadership. It's extraordinarily expensive for teachers and kids to go through these different regimes. So the stability and the quality of the Denver school board, I think, is a very good example. That's in part because this city, I think, has more great advocates per capita than any other urban area that we've studied. So community nonprofit groups that can sustain a vision of quality over a period of time is extraordinarily important to creating stable and effective governance. So I think Denver is a good example of that. Aligned investment, Ohio is a great example of their straight A fund combined sustainability and innovation. So encouraging schools to think out of the box. Talent development is a lesson that we've learned over the last 20 years that is super important. I think Houston is my favorite example of this. It's probably the region that's done the best job of both recruiting great teachers and leaders to the city, but also developing the talent that they have. So talent development is super important. Collective impact just means partnerships, getting everybody in the community or in the state on the same page, using the same goals and metrics. The collective impact label came from great work done in Cincinnati and now adopted by the KnowledgeWorks Foundation. Probably 36 communities, urban communities in the country use that collective impact. My favorite example, again, is in Texas, where Educate Texas is a statewide nonprofit organization that works with all the major urban areas and helps them create partnerships to improve education. And then finally, advocacy and policy. And I tend to think, like Alex, that entrepreneurship is really important. And so when I think about public policy, I think about skill up and startup. What are you doing to help everyone from birth to adulthood gain the skills they need to be successful? And secondly, are you making it easier for people to start businesses? The business that gets a lot of attention is when you are trying to recruit a big factory to your state. But I think what's more important in the long run is looking at the business climate and saying, are we making this a great place to attract people like Alex to start a business? So skill up and startup, I think, are super important. So we're going to talk about STEM and what this has to do with STEM. Kelly, why did GE really decide to zero in on STEM?
So I think it's a broader issue for GE. It's the fact that we're having a hard time in terms of hiring employees. So when you think about the new careers that are out there and the advancements that we're seeing in technology, you have a workforce that's not adequately prepared. And so even a study by Career Builders, employers state that 81% of employers have a hard time finding the appropriate skills that they need. And those skills are primarily in STEM. So as a company, we're spending an enormous amount in terms of job training. And so we have a center for training, but it's on a variety of skills. And so when we really go back and you look at what are the jobs that we're looking at, when you start to talk about a composite engineer, that's really using 3D technology. And so how do you start to build a pipeline that actually can help bring students from the K-12 system onto whether it's vocational training, certification programs, 2-year or 4-year degrees, and really help fill and build that pipeline. So when we look at STEM across the board, we realize that STEM has to change. And usually what you'll see in a school system is that you'll have science and mathematics and they check the box saying we've done STEM.
Right.
But they forget about the technology and the engineering components. And so part of the work that we've really been honing in on is how do you do a deeper dive to ensure that those become cross-functional. In Stamford, Connecticut, for example, if you walk into one of their middle schools, you'll go into a classroom, and if they don't tell you ahead of time, you're not going to know if it's the science or the math teacher, because it's that integrated. So whether they're using the robotics, whether they're using another type of project, they have to show that integration there. And I also want to just note with the STEM piece of it, that you can't allow for the science to say just because it's hands-on, that you've checked the box.
Yeah.
I have a 15 and a 16-year-old, and my 16-year-old chemistry, he had chemistry last year, and one of the projects that he was working on was a flame lab. I remember the flame lab experiment. And I thought, here we go. It's great that it's hands-on, but what has happened in terms of all this technology and the usage that we have to really integrate it into the system and to allow kids to experience differently?
I'm really excited about the 3D visualization and simulation. I mentioned I was at ISTE in Philadelphia yesterday, and I have a blog up on Getting Smart that has pictures of the maker and STEM and 3D printing that was really, really exciting. And the opportunities in science education are so extraordinary. The ability to visualize things in biology is so great. I don't know if anybody from CU is here. The University of Colorado is a leader in science simulations. They're called PHET, P-H-E-T. They're free and they're great. Little mini lessons that bring science to life. And earlier we talked about critical thinking, design thinking, systems thinking. Science sims are such a neat way to do that. Tammy and I are both excited about work experiences. Is that on your agenda, getting kids into different work settings?
It is, and it's something that, one of the examples I'll use is in New Orleans to play off of this. So here you have this whole system here, and yet you have 52% of African American males are not employed. So how do you build this pipeline to say, if you're going through high school, you graduate from high school, and now you don't have a job? So what do you do to start to build that bridge? And so some of the things that we've actually started to look at is how do you build partnerships with community colleges as well? and look at certification programs? And how do you start to provide that it doesn't just end at the K-12 experience, but really it goes beyond that to a K-14 experience?
So I am super excited about all the new, really productive CTE pathways, sort of through high school into post-secondary. Let's come back to that. And Tammy, tell us about your STEM center.
Well, the STEM Center
in
is
Salt Lake City, right?
Yep, it's in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a statewide initiative that was initiated off of legislative funding in 2013 to the tune of $10 million initially. The focus on that, and going to Senator Stevenson's comment, was to really look at where were our pain points. And if I step back and I turn that clock back to probably 4 years ago in our state, we were doing STEM, and there were pockets of best practices littered across the state. There are also places where we were doing STEM that weren't so good. But we also recognized, like all other states, and perhaps we're a little late to the game, but that the workforce component was huge in our state. We were having companies that were coming in and could not find the talent. And so we had to really rally around and say, what do we need to do to fix this? And what can we do at a state level to begin to bring our educators, our industry partners and advocates, our legislature, our higher ed and K-12 partners, and also our cultural and community partners. Because again, and I agree with Pedro, it's not just about science, tech, engineering, and math. It's a very holistic piece that we do. I was laughing when I think that Jeremy was saying, you know, his view of STEM. Our view of STEM, even though we won't change our acronym, I swear if somebody asked me to change the STEM acronym for our center again, I'm going to change it to the Hamster Action Center and be done with it. But we do recognize that STEM is one component of it, but it is really kind of embraced in this whole kind of liberal arts but so we go back and say that, you know, we recognize we needed to get our act together. We needed to find out where our pockets of excellence were, bring them together, look at where we had promising practices that needed some help, but really bring those collaborations together at a state level and move forward in a collaborative and unified way. It's worked out well. In fact, we established our STEM Action Center in the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and that's an interesting thing too, going back to the the highly polarized political nature of education. That was probably one of the hardest conversations we had about our STEM Action Centers. Where does it sit? Where is it housed? Who owns it? We looked at higher ed, and we looked at some of the other models across the state. The State Office of Education, which of course was not going to happen because I've never seen an agency with more lightning rods attached to a building and probably invisible ones strapped to people's backs. And so the most likely place was the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It was the most neutral place we could put it. And I have to say it's worked out well because it allows us to not only capitalize on that relatively neutral environment, but also to frame our conversation in an economic development context, which has been very important for us. So the center itself, the overall goal is to get more kids interested in STEM careers, to get them moving into career pathways, whether it's our CTE pathways or otherwise, and to retain them, help them do better, get more excited, and continue to pursue careers into companies that can help them find lifelong learning opportunities and a high quality of life with their careers. And I can go into a lot of lessons we've learned, but our year one, with our initial funding worked out, it's been working out very well. And the second year, we were awarded another $20 million from our legislature. Thank you. Senator Stevens isn't here to help. He was very critical in helping with that. And what's happened is, I won't go into the projects that were funded to oversee, but the real key here for success, Tom and everybody, I'll tell you, is that you can't go into a collaboration the way we used to do it, with this kind of almost guerrilla warfare attitude that I have an idea and my idea is great and you're gonna love my idea. We went to the State Office of Ed and we said, man, I was saying, I don't like this lightning rod piece. I don't like that educators are seen as the bad guys, that they're the ones that we point the fingers at when something goes wrong. What can we do in a very small scale, but low-hanging fruit, potentially high-impact way to help you out? And one of the things that came out of that for our STEM Action Center is that they said, we can't do R&D, we can't pilot, we can't try to find out what works best for our teachers and our students. And so we've emerged almost as an R&D arm of our State Office of Ed, which has been very effective.
So do you train teachers?
We have part of our funding in the second year, which was the only, other than our operational budget for the STEM Center itself, was $5 million in ongoing funding for professional learning. And so we do have what I think is starting to emerge as a very exciting project to look at working with the existing infrastructure and professional learning communities in our districts and use a video-based online platform that's not just a way of creating videos that are based on Utah teachers doing STEM teaching methodology as well, but also about a place to set goals together as teachers in their communities, to gather data and analyze it and talk about it, to watch what students are doing in their classrooms, come back and get peer-to-peer feedback on not only what the teacher themselves is doing, but also where students are struggling, how can they get peer feedback into that kind of iterative process, design thinking almost approach to it. So,
let's talk about CTE pathways. I'd love to have you both give a description of how you'd really like to see that work. So Tammy, what should STEM career pathways look like? When does that start? How does it work?
Well, and it's funny you bring that up, Tom, because we just had a very interesting high-level meeting the other day with the Lieutenant Governor. Some of our high-level business leaders have been engaged in education, higher ed, K-12 partners. And it was very interesting because we were putting up a list of everybody's favorite project that was workforce alignment, right? What did we want to do to do a better job of meeting our company's needs? And particularly in STEM, which is where a lot of the jobs are right now. And one of them was a K-8 CTE initiative in the state. So as many of you probably know, CTE traditionally resides from about 7th grade up through the first year of university, of post-secondary. So to have a K-8 CTE initiative on the dartboard was interesting. And one of our business leaders said, we can teach the soft skills. We really can. We can do that. We can teach better attitudes. We can work on that with our employees. We can do the technical skills. It's the problem solving and that allows students to be successful in a competency-based learning environment. It's the problem solving, and that has to go back to K. It has to go into the K-6 elementary arena. What can we do to create CTE, a pathway that begins in the elementary level and works its way up in a very integrated and connected way? And I was delighted and stunned all at the same time because we've struggled with CTE to some extent. We need to do a lot of reevaluation of where we sit with CTE pathways, right? Some are more relevant than others. And so we're having some very hard conversations in Utah about what CTE pathways are the ones that we need to focus on and really put some invested time and funding to bring our teachers and their abilities up to speed and allow our students to have the best experience in those CTE pathways. The pathways are there. It's what they look like when you get in the classroom that's really causing the heartburn for us and that we're trying to focus on. I'm not sure if that's where we're looking at our pathways.
Great, Tammy. What's a great CTE pathway look like?
So I would say, I think first of all, the CTE conversation really needs to happen. We've talked a lot about STEM, but we don't always talk about the career tech ed because we still think of it as a traditional vocational program. And so when you look at, I give Connecticut a lot of credit because one of the things they did is they kind of took a time out and they revamped their vocational programs. And right now, they reopened them about a year ago, and there's a school in Connecticut, Wright Tech, it's in Stamford, Connecticut, and that particular school started the first facilities management program in the country. They have colleges and universities approaching these 9th grade students saying, you complete high school, we're going to give you 2 years worth of college credit, and let's talk about scholarships. There's a competition going on. And I think that's how this starts. And then it's also going a step further. In Erie, Pennsylvania, they had a career tech ed school, and they pulled the principal out and said, you know what, we're not having a school. We're going to have career tech ed embedded in all of our schools. So when you really start to think about the shifts that need to happen and occur, is that you start to build a pipeline that works from the K through 8 system, carry it on to the high school, but really start to engage what are the employer's needs, how can community colleges be stronger partners, how do we work with higher ed institutions, and really build an overall collaborative that it's not just centered on any one organization, but you start to understand what are the start and the stop points for each organization and how do you build off of it.
And Tom,
Yeah.
can I say, I would also add to this, I think, Kelly, you really hit on some very critical points on the whole CTE, the pathways and the issues, and what works. And I think one of the things that I've seen working very well in our state, and we'd like to see replicated, is this idea for students to get earlier access in high school, in 11th and 12th, but that when they exit, those re-entry points and those exit points are clearly defined. I mean, we call it the stacked credentialing, right? But I don't think we do a very good job of making it clear to the students and their parents and even the teachers as they talk to the kids, where are those exit points and what do they mean? And when you've been out in the workforce and you come back in to gain something in that pathway, the CTE pathway can't just stop when a kid graduates from high school. They've got to know that when they get into that pathway, it's going to keep delivering for them post-graduation. And so I think we need to think of the CTE pathway as the gift that keeps on giving, so to speak, for these kids.
So, I'm going to pivot off two things that you guys have mentioned. First of all, this is the first panel that I've been on where anybody has mentioned CTE in elementary school. So that's super interesting. And to connect it to what Pedro was talking about, my sense of what CTE looks like in elementary school is more time for tinkering, right? And my blog today on Getting Smart shows pictures of robotics that I saw at ISTE that blew my doors off. I'm an engineer, and I have never seen things like the learn to code and tinkering from little bits, electronic kits and modular robotics, a Boulder company. These are extraordinary things that ought to be in every elementary school. They ought to be in after-school programs. Every kid in your state ought to have time to tinker, a chance to create, to learn, to be creative around STEM, and that ought to start in elementary school. I want to tell you a story about Scott, a young man that I met in Marion, Ohio, about 2 months ago. Scott is a kid, he's about this tall, he can't weigh more than 130 pounds, he's very quiet, and it turns out Scott is one of 8 young people on the planet that are certified in the 2 leading robotics, FANUC and Motoman. And when I heard that, my ears perked up. Turns out he gets paid about $35 an hour to do training for Honda. He'll often lead sessions at his high school career center where college kids and adults come in and learn on those robotics. Scott is a kid who was doing poorly in a traditional high school. A guidance counselor said, maybe you'll like this. I think, but somewhat unaware of what a cool pathway this could be. So as a high school kid, he's earning college credit. He has a work certificate. He has a terrific job. He is now traveling around the country as a trainer for Honda. Honda has given him a scholarship for college. Scott is going to finish college with $100,000 in his pocket instead of $100,000 in debt. He helped me understand that there's a very different opportunity set today in CTE, and that we live in a very different world. This is not a binary world where some kids go to college and some kids don't. This is where a lot of kids are going to work and earn, work and learn in a ladder that progresses through technical careers, where they have stackable credentials that are sometimes in formal institutions of education and sometimes outside of those, sometimes with an industry partner. One key lesson from RAMTech, it's RAMTC is the name of this training center, is that you can find it on Getting Smart. If you just go Getting Smart and look for RAMTech, you'll find this story. But the key lesson is that every other community college in the country shied away from offering industry certification. They wanted to offer a generic certification in robotics. Well, the robotics companies came to that skill center and they said, we don't even want you to train people because we just have to retrain them when we hire them. If you're going to train them on the robotics that every factory in Ohio uses. So they made the decision to offer certificates actually valuable to industry. And that's really what changed this program, and it's why now this little high school career center in Marion, Ohio is a national training center for people like Honda. So these career pathways can be, I think, super valuable, both to school districts and to kids. They can launch this lifetime of working and learning. It really opened my eyes to a very different opportunity set. We're not talking about high school shop like it was when I was in school.
You know, one thing I just want to add, and I think it's the challenge when we talk about the career tech ed side, is that a lot of these students, they don't stay put in a school.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of transition that's happening. And you also think about that with military children too. That's another population. So if career tech is housed in a school or it's a program, you're missing an enormous amount. Millions and millions of students miss that opportunity. Right. And that's why I think when you talk about this career tech ed piece, and especially around the STEM side of it, you have to start to think about it as an approach that doesn't exist just within a school, but how does it exist across a system, across a state, across the country, so that if they transfer and they're moving in and out, then that they have that ability that, hey, I was in this wonderful program and now I've moved across the country and now they've just lost out on an opportunity.
So this is where regional and state leadership is so important. Exactly. Because you need kids should have dual enrollment opportunities starting in high school that easily transfer to a community college, and that has to transfer to all the state four-year institutions. Credentials have to be stackable, right, so that they can earn them anywhere and progress. So talk about this as a regional or a state initiative.
For the stack credentialing, or, well, I mean, we've had, you know, Kelly had mentioned earlier about this notion of certification programs that give access to students. You know, we've, from our state level point of view, a portion of our funding that we received from the legislature was targeted to looking at high demand areas in STEM occupations and kind of back designing into our schools and asking ourselves, where do we have good certification programs that perhaps need some support to expand capacity, or add some element or component that's missing, such as an apprenticeship program or additional pathway that might give the students another opportunity, and where are we missing, just pure missing a certification that could align with the high demand jobs. So we've at this point in time, we've funded about $5 million to some grants over the last year, early implementation, some ongoing development, to school districts, to our LEAs, to partner with their post-secondary institutions, whether it be a non-credit applied tech or one of their community colleges or university, to create a pathway that leads to employment. But the requirement of that grant program was that industry or industries had to be highly engaged, helping to create the course content and the curriculum materials, provide instruction. Yep. And it couldn't just be kind of a superficial engagement by the industry partners in that region. Right. And what came out of that was very interesting. And I was thinking about this as Pedro was giving his talk about this notion of districts needing to work together more, be more cooperative and leverage their resources and learn from each other. And this certification program has really yielded that result for us. You know, where we had districts that had never partnered together, districts that had not truly worked well with their applied technology colleges just down the street. These grant programs brought them together to do something more collaborative. And it wasn't just about the money. I mean, I know a lot of people think if you give money, it brings people together. Right. We could have thrown, $500,000 at these two districts and they would have said, no thanks. We're doing our own thing and it's working just fine. I think what made the difference is that you had individuals from the State Office of Ed working with the STEM Action Center coming together to say, hey guys, let's work this out. We know you have got the opportunity to create a great certification program for your aerospace and defense industry. You got to get it done. Let's talk, and now we have an amazing advanced composites manufacturing certification network of 17 different school districts that are creating a certification program, a base level certification program, working with industry, our manufacturing association. And what was really cool that came out of that wasn't just these districts coming together in a consortium with their own grants and kind of, dovetailing and working together on this, but that it provided an additional springboard and opportunity when Boeing came in and said, we want to do some work with the state of Utah in these advanced composites. Said, hey, we've got 2 districts that are working together. Actually, it was 7 districts working together already on this project, and they're ready to roll. So they were poised. So it created opportunity. But that's some of the work we've been doing from our STEM center with our State Office of Ed and our tech
those
centers.
are really valuable certificates.
They really are, and they're not easy to put together. It takes a lot of collaborative work and brain power to come up with the right certificate with the right pathway, and not only that, but the right marketing and branding and recruiting, because you can put the pathway there, you can put the courses there, but if you can't get the kids in, and that took industry. Industry had to step up.
I want to take 30 seconds and give a shout out to 2 terrific CTE programs you may want to look into. One is GPS Education Partners in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It's a manufacturing program where kids finish their last 2 years of high school at a manufacturing site. They do online work with a teacher in the morning and take and do a manufacturing internship in the afternoon. So they get a job certificate, they get college credit, a high school diploma. They always get job offers when they graduate. That nonprofit is starting to expand. I can put you in touch if you're interested. Second is the NAF, National Academy Foundation, 667 career high schools around America. They just introduced NAF Track. It is a certification program that combines active learning in the classroom and internships, and they have a terrific rubric for their internships. They prepare kids for them, and then the advisor on the job site gives kids feedback, and it's the combination of schoolwork and real work that is part of their diploma. So a terrific program that's widely supported by a lot of employers, including STEM employers. Join me in thanking TAMI and KELLI for a great talk about STEM.
Thank you.